Good morning, dear students. Today we'll get to the problem of the semantic classification of the vocabulary. At the previous lecture, we have discussed the basic notions of semasiology, the ways of the analysis of vocabulary units based on the semantic principles. Today, we in practice we'll see how we do this semantic classification, and what types of semantic classes we can find in the English vocabulary, as well as in any other language, of course. So the topics for discussion today will be the principles of semantic classification and a group of semantic classes. We'll talk about synonyms, antonyms, homonyms, and in general about classification of the vocabulary into semantic, thematic, conceptual, and other types of fields, which depend, of course, on the choice of the criteria for semantic classification. So the semantic classification of the words is done in all languages, and this is a very, very useful kind of research, especially for language learners, of course, because for me personally it was much easier to learn the English vocabulary based on semantic classification into fields, into groups, different groups, synonyms, antonyms, and etc., etc. So I will share some of my experience today, how better to apply this very interesting tool, which is called semantic classification, to our personal needs and to the needs of our students. So the vocabulary can be classified according to various criteria, of course, depending on the objective of the lexicographer or researcher or a student. So we can base our classification upon such categories as similarities and contrasts, in composition, in structures, in usage, and of course in meaning. This is what semantic classification is all about. The criteria for semantic classification are, of course, different semantic features of the vocabulary we deal with. And basic classification is based upon the similarities or differences of meanings, the dialectal features, terminological features of the vocabulary, because sometimes very neutral words can become important in some professional sphere. So we should know where to use the word and how to use it. So, the approaches to the classification of the vocabulary units can be based on the paradigmatic principles or syntagmatic principles. Paradigmatic principles denote the relationship between a set of linguistic units or a set of language elements which form either mutually exclusive vocabulary or different syntactic roles, for example. Syntagmatic approach denotes relationship between linguistic units used sequentially, that is, to make word combinations or well-formed syntactic structures or sentences. Okay, so synonymy is a universal phenomenon, of course. In all languages we can find synonymic groups. And synonyms are words which can be used differently, both at the denotational level, on referential levels, and depending on the functional styles or registers of the vocabulary. So I give you here in one of my slides a very comprehensive, very detailed description or definition of synonyms, which I really like very much, provided by Irina Vladimirovna Arnold in her lexicology textbook, The English Word. Synonyms are, please memorize this definition, because it really, describes all the aspects of synonyms. Because when I ask normally students what synonyms are, they say they are the same words or similar words. No, this is a very, very short and very wrong answer. So the answer is this. Synonyms are two or more words of the same language, of course, belonging to the same part of speech, possessing one or more identical or nearly identical denotational meanings, interchangeable at least in some context, not in all, but differing in morphemic composition, in phonemic shape, in shades of meaning, in connotations, in the affective value, in style, in valency, which is combination ability, and idiomatic use. So very, very comprehensive definition. Okay, well, now here is just one example of how we can express the feeling of affection or attachment in English. This is not an exhaustive list. There are many more words to express the feeling of affection, but I chose here several of them, and they are, of course, love, the most frequently used word, but there is also an affection, attachment, passion, crush, desire, infatuation, lust, and many more words. And here, all words here denote a strong feeling of affection to somebody or something. But look at the number of words, and there, again, I repeat, this list is not exhaustive. You can find much more words, especially if you go to the ideographic dictionary by Roger, which is structured according to the concepts or ideas. That's why it's called ideographic dictionary. There you will find maybe about 50 more words using which we can express our feeling of affection. So, of course, love here, I just looked through the dictionary definitions of all these words, and here I have picked up those features which differentiate one word from another for you. You will be doing this during your seminar classes, and this is how it is done. It's done. Love is stronger than affection. Attachment is a feeling of fondness and loyalty. Love doesn't always mean loyalty, but when you use the word attachment, then this semantic feature, this theme appears. Fondness and loyalty as well to someone or something. Passion is, of course, a stronger feeling than love, and barely controllable, Love can be maybe somehow organized and controlled, but passion, no. Okay. Crush is also love, but it is a very brief, very intense infatuation. So briefness is stressed here in this definition. And desire is a very strong feeling of wanting to have something or somebody as your own property, okay? So this is desire. Infatuation is very intense feeling of affection, but short-lived passion. So you see, lust is, of course, something is a very strong love and linked with sexual desire or a passionate desire for something or somebody, and often it is used in a negative sense. So here we have the stylistic coloring of the word lust compared to love or desire or passion, etc. Okay, so you see, here you see 8 synonyms, and each of them has something inside it which cannot be always taken into account when we substitute one word for another, but we should. Native speakers do so, and we also have to learn how to do it, how to differentiate in which discourse, in which context to use which word. Okay, now we come to classification of synonyms, and generally there are, again, very, very many classifications of synonyms, but I will give you the basic ones. The ideographic synonyms convey the same notion or idea, but differ in the ways of the presentation. For example, to go and to walk and to plod, to trudge, to shuffle, to waddle, all of them are synonyms describing movement. But when you read their definitions in dictionaries like we did in the example with love, you will see that all these ways of movement, but movement on foot, differ from one another. Okay, stylistic synonyms. Of course, these synonyms, a pair of words, or even more than a pair, maybe sometimes, which show different stylistic characteristics, such as emotional coloring, evaluative meaning, functional style. For example, the verbs to love and to worship, they differ in what? So love is sort of, it becomes neutral here. But when we worship somebody, then that means that we add some additional feelings, you know, some authority to our feeling. We worship somebody we consider to be superior to us, better to us, for example, in this or that meaning. Okay, absolute synonyms, sometimes we say absolute synonyms, but linguists do not accept this terminology. There are no absolute synonyms, because you know that from the definition by Arnold, they can be only close in meaning, or share one or two shades of meaning, or one or two seams of meaning, in meaning. So, but sometimes we can come through absolute synonyms in sciences, in linguistic terminology, for example. Noun and substantive mean the same. Scientist, researcher are also the same, more or less. You know, sentence is a common word, but when grammarians use this notion in their lectures or in their scientific studies, they use the term syntaxeme by analogy with phoneme, morpheme, theme, lexeme. You know, syntaxeme is a unit of research in grammar. Okay, and sometimes shorter or longer variants of some terms, like denotative meaning or denotational meaning. So I use these words interchangeably. Okay. But every synonymic group, every synonymic line has one word which is more or less suitable in order to replace all of them, you know, adding probably some additional words, additional evaluative words, or some emotional words like very much, greatly, you know, something like that, and adding some words describing the manner of doing this or that process. So a synonym, and such words are called synonymic dominants. Synonymic dominant in the synonymic group, of course, is the most general term potentially containing basic or specific features of each member and able to be substituted for any other member of the group. So, and here in the line to look, to glance, to gaze, to stare, and to watch, the most stylistically neutral and the most frequently used word is to look. So, to glance is a very quick look, so to say. To gaze is looking in some surprise and for a longer time, of course. To stare is not very impolite. You cannot stare at the person. You cannot stare or look into his eyes, you know, for some time. So here, stylistic difference is, well, in this slide devoted to the synonymic dominant, you see three examples of two verbs: to look, to glance, to gaze, to stare, to watch. And there is a clear difference between these synonyms, of course. To look is more neutral, it has no stylistic coloring, but to glance is to look for a very short time, you should know it. To gaze is to look for a long time, and to stare is also to look, to gaze rather, to gaze in a long time, and most often impolitely, because, you know, staring supposes some, you know, some even special facial expression, you know, sometimes with open mouth even, you know, especially children when they stare at something, you know, with a surprise or bewilderment, you know, but it's really a strong word. To watch is a word which means to look intently and purposefully, not just looking, you know, by the way, so to say. Okay, to eat, to devour, to gorge, to gobble, to wolf, So you see to eat and to wolf, you see they are antonymic on this scale of synonyms. Normally synonyms are placed on some kind of a scale of a degree of intensivity of the action. Okay, to eat is normal, neutral word. To devour means to eat in great quantities, you know, when a hungry person eats. You know, to gorge is to eat in big portions and hurriedly, you know. To wolf is to eat much and to eat quickly, like wolves, you know, who want to eat their prey as much as possible, you know. And to wolf here is of course a metaphorical word, and to eat like a wolf. Okay, large, and of course you know the words enormous, vast, extended, immense, etc., etc., and there are many more words in this synonymic line, but large here is the most neutral word, and large, big, they are synonymic dominants of this synonymic group. Okay, so of course there are different types of synonyms. They can be verbs, they can be adjectives, they can be nouns. Okay, so, and there are synonyms which we call euphemisms. Probably you know this word. So synonyms are really the source of euphemisms. Euphemisms are polite words used to refer to things people may find upsetting or embarrassing, you know, to talk about in public. So about sex, body, death, etc. So to die is a neutral word. It's normal word, literary word, but the archaic synonym of it is to decease. So it's a more polite way of saying. And the same about toilet. The word toilet is used very, very rarely, maybe among the close relatives only, but the English language has a lot of euphemisms to substitute for this word, and it is ladies' room or gents' room, etc., etc. Double O, you know, whatever. Okay, so again, synonyms can be classified according to another criterion. They can be contextual, that is context-depending synonyms, which are similar in meaning only under specific distributional conditions, only in this particular context or occasion. Okay, and when people understand what you are talking about. So the verb to buy has a lot of synonyms: to purchase, to get, and get is really more colloquial in usage. Dialectal synonyms also can be discovered in the English language, and they pertain to different variants of the language. So kid is considered to be more American, and child is British, but when you are in Scotland, you will come across the word bairn, because this is a word from the Scottish dialect of the English language. Okay, so this briefly is all I wanted to tell you about synonyms, but you can find much more material if you Google the word synonyms in the English language. There are many interesting researches in the Google to read about synonyms, because synonyms can be not only among lexemes but among phraseological units as well. Morphemes have synonyms too, but unfortunately the time is too short to talk about them. Let's get to another semantic class, which is antonymy. Antonymy, an antonym is one of a pair of words with opposite meanings. And of course, a word can have more than one antonym. In some cases, to eat and to gobble might become antonyms because they depict different way of eating. Okay. So again, there are many classifications of antonyms. So one class of them is called gradable, and gradable antonyms are words which describe some phenomenon which is represented as a continuous spectrum. For example, temperature, it can be hot, it can be cold, it can be cool, you know, warm. So, you know, you can grade the degree of temperature in different ways. Complementary antonyms are words with opposite meaning, where the two meanings do not lie on a continuous spectrum, and they are really contradictories. Okay, and these words are words like dead, alive, day, night, exit, entrance, etc. Relational antonyms are words which describe relations. I mean, they are not really oppositional. Teacher and student or pupil, we are not in opposition. We are a very good team. But as a relational antonyms, there is an opposition. So teacher and students, teacher and pupils, okay, and husband, wife, doctor, patient, teach, learn, servant, master. You see, so they are not really physical oppositions, but they are relational oppositions. Okay, and there is a very nice group of antonyms which is called derivational. This is a very handy tool in the English language, and not only in the English language, when you use affixes in order to compose an antonym. They are called derivational antonyms, and we even have special affixes in order to make them, to create these such antonyms, like complete, incomplete, arm, disarm, code, decode, regular, irregular, sensible, senseless, etc., etc. So now there is another group, of semantic group we come to, which are called homonyms. Homonyms can be very, very misleading, right? Because you pronounce a word in a context, and some students who don't know English very well, they might misunderstand the word if they don't understand the context and the sentence as a whole. Homonyms are words which are identical, either in sound form or in spelling, but there are such homonyms which are identical in both. Okay, so the word bank can be used in the meaning of a shore of a river or sea, and a bank as an institution where we keep our finances, right? But they both are nouns, they both have the same grammatical paradigm, and such words are really in majority. English is very rich in such pairs and even groups of words. So, as I already mentioned, if synonyms and antonyms can be regarded as the treasure of the language, homonyms lead to confusion and misunderstanding of the utterance. That's why they should be taught separately, of course, during learning a foreign language. So how do homonyms appear in the language? There are several sources of homonymy, and they include phonetic changes, they include borrowing and word building. And you can see from the examples on the slide these cases. So besides synonyms, antonyms, homonyms, there are many other semantic classes: hyperonyms, hyponyms, paronyms, toponyms, anthroponyms, international words, and many more many more classes, semantic classes, depending on the criteria for research. Well, also, there is a very useful way of classifying the vocabulary into semantic fields. Semantic fields, lexicosemantic groups, thematic groups, etc. Semantic fields are groups of words classified according to the concepts which are in the focus of these groups. And these fields often are called semantic or conceptual even. So they are mostly characterized by a common concept. Here you see the example, the color words, blue, red, yellow, black, etc. There are very many color words and color expressions even in the English language. They can be described, they can constitute the semantic field of colors. The word relationship, family relationship, father, mother, brother, cousin, sister, etc., they are members of the semantic field of kinship terms, and etc., etc. So, classification, as I have already mentioned at the beginning of my lecture, is a very important procedure, and it is important because it systematizes the vocabulary, describes the vocabulary through certain systems and semantic fields, depending on the objective of the research. And I am absolutely sure that learning vocabulary as a system of semantic and non-semantic classes does facilitate the language learning and is very important for developing linguistic and communicative competencies. Thank you very much for your attention. See you at the next lecture.